Well, welcome to the Healthy Christian Leader Show, friends. I have the privilege of having Dr. Laurel Buckingham with us today, and I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
Laurel. You know, it's
a long time coming.
That's true. It has, because it was about a year ago that we met in Truro,
right,
and had the conversation. And I've been looking forward to it because you're a little bit of a legend in our maritime provinces, and as a guy who is passionate about the kingdom of God, passionate about the lordship of Jesus Christ, and passionate about the local church.
I'm loving hearing you say that word passionate, because that sure is the truth. A little too much sometimes.
But so much ministry over the years. You shared, I know you're never supposed to mention age, but you've reached the age of
85.
85.
I preached recently in a place, I preached about Caleb being 85.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm 85 years old, and I'm as strong today as I was 45 years ago when God showed him the promised land. I said, I got one up on Caleb. I'm stronger today than I was at 40.
Well, that's awesome. That is awesome. And you've been involved in leadership in local church there in New Brunswick. Can you tell us a little bit?
Well, I've been involved. I pastored the church for 45 years, and I finished pastoring the church 11 years ago, and I developed an organization called the Buckingham Leadership Institute. And since then, I've been mentoring pastors in clusters of 12 to 15, and sometimes larger groups when we've done it 2 days. I won't get into all those details. But anyway, and this has been very rewarding to see some of those pastors just take on new life and excitement and energy and expectation and all that. Then I do church consultations, which we come up with a different name. But what it amounts to, basically the bottom line, it's quite involved. It's really involved, but it's helping churches go on to the next level to reach their full potential. And right talking about that, my biggest burden when I was pastoring, among many other things, there were a whole lot of burdens, and challenges. But the number one thing, as far as leading the place, what do we do now to go on to that next level? And that became more and more challenging as time went on.
Because the challenges at each threshold are different.
They surely are. Yeah. And you have to reinvent. And I don't know how many times we reinvented the church, and I had to reinvent me because I had to keep growing. And didn't even know a thing about leadership when I first started. We didn't used to hear the word back there 65 years ago, but now we hear it all the time. But I've just had to continue to learn. If you're going to be a leader, you can't lead without learning. And I'm listening to podcasts and all that all the time, just trying to keep my mind in gear with everything that anybody comes up with that can help us to be more effective.
So today, at 85, you're still growing and maturing and developing.
That's wonderful you'd ask that, because I have to work harder at it today than I ever did before in my life. And I'll tell you why, is because there's a whole lot of things I got to unlearn that once worked, that were fantastic, but it would just cause defeat today. And so I've got to learn what works today. So when you got to unlearn, plus you got to learn, yes. That makes it a little more challenging.
Yeah,
it's harder for me at this stage than it is for a young fellow starting out.
You know what I really appreciate is, and I'm so encouraged by, many leaders and many that'll be listening to us today in this conversation are thinking, okay, I'm at that threshold of about 60, 61, and retirement's just 3 or 4 years down the road, because there's that cultural end point.
Yeah.
But I don't know, that's a cultural endpoint. I don't know that that's a biblical endpoint.
Sure isn't. And I could come up with all kinds of scripture on that, but I'm not remembering it right now at this point. But I've had my friends who know me and know about the ministry and they're involved and so on, who have said, you have seen more happen since retirement age than you did prior to retirement age. Mm-hmm. And I think the best way to retire is not to retire, because you always got to have purpose and a passion to go with that purpose. And I say life is not about pleasure. Life is about purpose. And when you got a purpose that you can feel great about and see results coming from that, that's your pleasure.
Well,
so that makes me about the happiest guy on the face of the earth.
That's so awesome. And, you're definitely speaking to my own heart. I rolled over to 60 this year.
Oh, you're just a kid.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Because the Canadian government doesn't think so, because they sent me the option to get into my pension plan.
There you go.
And then, Laurel, the next thing, I became a grandfather.
Oh, boy.
And then my wife said, you're not hearing as well as you used to. You should get a test. And they said, well, you need hearing aids.
I know all about that.
So I thought, my goodness, I need to start thinking about retirement. And then it's like the Lord said, no, you're not. And you just keep speaking to this.
I got to tell you just a quick one about this guy. His wife said to me, he's fully retired, said to him, what are you going to do today? He said, nothing. She said, well, that's what you did yesterday. Yeah, but he said, I'm not finished yet. Wouldn't that be a great life?
Oh, that's good fun. Well, in our conversation today, the title of this talk is, or discussion rather, what every Christian leader should know. And I'm very interested to hear your perspective on what you feel, are some of those key elements of what every Christian leader needs to know. And I'm going to toss the first question out to you. And that is, what are some of the key qualities that define a healthy Christian leader, and how can we seek to foster those qualities in our own lives?
Well, that's quite the question. And I'm telling you what, there's so many trails we could go down there. But I guess maybe what I would say as a fundamental and foundational thing, that we have got to be a full follower of Jesus if we're going to be healthy. And that has a lot of ramification, being a full follower. I think there's followers, there's faithful followers, but a lot of people don't reach the freedom of being a full follower. And in my mind, one of the things, I think the key to being a full follower is never going to be about me. Jesus said, not my will. Well, if I'm really, truly following Jesus, it's never, ever going to be about me and what I like or what I want or what I think should be. It's going to be all about what Jesus went to that cross for and whatever we can do to see transformed lives. See, people ask me all the time, what do you want your legacy to be? So I'm not interested in legacy. I'm interested in fulfilling my call. It's not about building buildings, not about raising money, not about numerical goals. It is all about seeing people born into the family of God. And if I'm putting all my focus in that with full passion and unselfishness like Jesus was, then we'll have to build buildings. We'll have to raise money. We'll have to do all that. But that's not what it's all about. And I do think it's so easy, just our entrepreneurial spirit, to get caught up in just the building of something. And I'm all for whatever we need to do, obviously, because we built an auditorium, see a couple of thousand people, and many building programs over the years. But what drove that was the purpose, Jesus' purpose when he went to the cross, to see a lost world come to know him.
Such a really critical question, because it seems as leaders, it's very, very easy to lose perspective of that primary true north.
I hear it coming through all the time, even in some of the people that are doing a great job in these podcasts I listen to. But inadvertently, you can smell that when it's kind of about building and it's kind of backwards. And if we are really, truly, honestly in harmony with what Jesus went to that cross for, and Jesus, in my mind, was the greatest statesman that ever lived. And I don't know what a definition of a statesman is, but I know what my definition is. I'm going to be always for the greater good, which is seeing people's lives transformed. There couldn't be any greater good than that. I'm going to always be for the greater good, no matter how it may affect me personally. And often, over and over again, I would say in our church, we're not going to do in this church what I like. has nothing to do with what I like. We're going to do what works and what reaches the people we need to be reaching. I think I'm off the track a little bit, but
I think you're doing a great job. It's very much, a passion of mine is to see that true north established in my heart and the lives of leaders, because it's so easy to get distracted.
I love that word, true north. When you say true north, if I am called,
Yeah.
if I got a calling of God, and I fought it like crazy because I didn't think I could ever do it. I was no good in school. I was no good at anything. I was born and brought up on a farm, broke all the machinery I ever touched, and spent 4 years in grades 9 and 10. So anyway, but the call was so strong. Well, once I yielded to what I fought for so long, no turning back. And that call is what? It's to see people's lives change.
Yes.
It's not about being a part of an organization or anything, building buildings or anything like that. It's about transformed lives.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree.
Yeah.
But that takes a refocus because we can get distracted as we're going on.
We do get distracted. But here's one of the things. We had a kind of a mission statement. I didn't know what a mission statement was when we put that together. We called it the manifesto of our church, and it was this: using every available method at every available time to reach every available person in every available place. Everything we are, everything we do is for that purpose, because Jesus came to seek and to save those who are lost. And that came back to bite us over and over again, because every once in a while we'd wake up, well, here's something else we should be doing. Here's something else. It would be a method that could help us. And those methods had to change as time went on. And I highly value change. That's another thing a lot of older people have difficulty with, but I don't have any difficulty with it. And sometimes I'm too anxious to change in order to get the job
You'd be
done.
what they call the early adopter.
I would be very much the early, I'd be the radical. But anyway, but here's what I wanted to say, though, about that. When you say true north, I think that's the true north of what our calling is. I'm talking about in relation to our calling.
Yeah.
And nobody can argue that. If they're a Christian, they can't argue that. So they can argue a whole lot of things, other things, about building buildings and raising money and all kinds of other stuff and setting goals for numbers and all that kind of, and they do have difficulty with it. But when you're saying we're all out to win souls, and by example, that's what you're doing.
Right.
And celebrating it every time anybody else does it, I'm telling you what, things happen.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. What are some of the most common barriers to healthy leadership that you see leaders facing today?
Well, I'm not sure I have the full answer to that, but I think it's so easy to get distracted. There's so many distractions, and it's even so easy to get distracted by people in the church not understanding. And of course, we have to help them. That's what leadership is all about, is helping people to understand and helping to understand the why behind the what. That's where I made my big mistake in the early days. I was so fired up about the what, I just thought everybody else would be. But if they don't understand the real why, and the real why is what we just talked about, then if they understand the real why, there's a lot more openness to the what. And I think church people, and this is, I don't blame them. I refuse to get in a blame mode. I saw it as it's totally on me as the leader. And if there's misunderstanding, people not getting it, I am the one that has to take the responsibility and build the trust. Everything rises. The trust is all on me as the leader. So I can't blame the people. I can't ever say,
it's really our greatest asset.
Oh, it's the most powerful asset of all assets. And so I can't blame, if they don't trust, I can't say, well, I'm the pastor. That's the worst thing you can do to destroy trust. Use some manipulation title or something to get to leverage for whatever it is you want to accomplish. I have to build that by my example, by my love for the Lord, by my creativity, by my ideas, by my passion, by my work ethic. There's no end to the things that build trust. And I think the church is, if they're left to their own devices, we can get very selfish. And if left to our own devices, we want to be taken care of, the church people. Our main mission, the main mission of the church is not the people in the church. It's the people outside the church that we need to be reaching for Christ. Mm-hmm. And so that causes us to want to develop the people in the church, disciples that have that vision. But a real disciple is going to have a vision that Jesus had when he went to the cross for the lost people of the world. And so I think we have to work against that continually. What I say is, being a full follower of Jesus, let this mind be in you, which is in Christ Jesus. And people would say, how was it that your church kept growing for 45 years? Well, there were times when it would plateau, and then we'd have to reinvent and think of whatever we need to do to go on to the next level. And I would say, look, it's complicated, it's complex, but if you want a simple answer, this is a simple answer. Our people, in general, with exceptions, but our people have moved from a selfish agenda to a totally unselfish agenda. What does that mean? They've moved away from a way of thinking. Is this what I like? Is this what I'm used to? Is this what I enjoy? Is this what's going to make me happy, my family happy? Is this going to make me comfortable? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They've moved from that agenda to an agenda that says whether I like it or not, whether it's my cup of tea or not, whether it's anything we've ever done before or not, if it's going to help us get more people to heaven someday, then I am going to stand behind it regardless of how it affects me. And that was taught, and not only taught, but examples brought. And I would highlight, sometimes even name names, where people were living that kind of life. And I'd have people all the time say to me, I just used to think it was about what I wanted. And it's not about that at all. It's God's will that's going to be best for me. Yes. Well, what is God's will? That the lost world come to know Jesus. Mm-hmm. And they are set free. They're set free to a whole new level of a relationship with the Lord when they can get over their own selfish interests.
Such a good, powerful word. Like that would preach.
Yes, listen, it's preached a good many times. You can be sure of that.
So what steps do you recommend leaders take to nurture their mental health and spiritual well-being amid the demands of leadership?
Yeah. Well, I remember reading a book called The Hope Quotient. It's by Ray Smith, who's had a great church and still pastoring the church. It just went from nothing to being one of the greatest churches in that area. And he said, stay encouraged. Now, he told about how his daughter came home from school and she was supposed to do an essay on leadership. And so she thought her dad, being a leader, would be a good person to interview. And so she said, what's the most important thing about leadership? And he said, stay encouraged. Well, she was a little disappointed. She thought it should be more complicated than that and should be a little more to it than that. But I'll tell you what, that's a big thing.
It is.
And to stay encouraged is meeting. Well, you stay in the Word, of course, and in prayer, but that's not everything. You've got to be around people that can feed you, and people who've got a vision, and people who've got passion. And I have to say, during my entire ministry, I was always looking for people doing far better than I was and picking their brain and asking them questions and hearing their stories of God's blessing. How could that not encourage you and keep you going, So I think that's a real critical thing.
So tell me now, what role does peer support and mentorship play in developing a healthy leader in your perspective?
Yeah, look, I shouldn't say everything. But I think, I love those questions. It is so absolutely critical. Again, for your encouragement, for your feeding, for your learning, for your envisioning. But it's important to get around the right people. And so, as I said, I spent a lifetime meeting with people that were doing far better than I was and asking questions like crazy to learn everything I could possibly learn. It's critical to keep alive, keep abreast, and there's no end to the opportunities. During those difficult times, I really was feeling sorry for myself, and I didn't understand everything the way I now understand things, and I was blaming when I shouldn't have been blaming. I should have been maybe not blaming me, but taking full responsibility. And so I read the whole book of Nehemiah one time in one sitting. After getting to reading that book, I thought, you whining wimp, what is wrong with you? Smarten up. And I love what I think this is so critical in leadership. What Nehemiah said, what God put in my heart to do. Now he had a call. Mm-hmm. And then he said, to build up those broken down walls, mm-hmm. he had a cause. Mm-hmm. And then he said, when he's getting opposed everywhere, his own people and everybody on the side, he said, we will arise and we will build. I'm telling you what, in light of no cooperation, and I thought, well, you better wise up here, buddy. Get with it.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. And the worst fuel on which to run the spiritual motor, so to speak, is the fuel of inspiration. Now, nobody likes inspiration like I do. But the minute anybody faces opposition, inspiration evaporates. It's down the tubes. Mm-hmm. So what is the fuel? It is a fuel of commitment. I am going to do what God has called me to do and has put in my heart to do. I'm committed to doing what I'm supposed to do, whether I feel like doing it or not. And boy, we need some of that.
Such a good word, because there are times when, the emotional passion, we have to move through with just raw, pure commitment.
That's right. Exactly right.
How do leaders stay connected to their unique God-given calling amidst the demands and distractions of leadership?
Well, it's probably some of what we've already said, but it is to just keeping focused, and I think that's maybe in the question, but it is so easy, and probably there's nobody, including myself, that doesn't get distracted, but when you put into practice for a long enough period of time, doing the right thing, and not allowing. Now, that doesn't mean I never allowed, but I'm just saying, basically, as a pattern, there's power in patterns. Mm-hmm. And if we have the right pattern, then we get the right results. If we have a bad pattern, then we're just continually being defeated. And it takes a lot of discipline, and everybody struggles with discipline. I think the people talk about the most, probably the ones that struggle with the most. I know I struggle with it, but we either suffer the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. The pain of regret doesn't get you anywhere, but the pain of discipline gets you not everywhere, but it sure gets you a long way.
No, that's so good. Where can leaders plug into basically nurture themselves, as we've talked about, in staying encouraged and staying focused?
Your podcast. No, I'm making a point here. But anything, whether it's podcast, getting with your peers, reading books, getting into spiritual retreats and those kinds of things, it just has to be stimulated and kept alive all the time. We can never get the feeling, I've had enough, I've seen enough, I've heard enough, I'm all right now.
Yeah, we can't really be giving all the time unless we're taking in.
Well, that's right.
Personally.
And there's so much available to take in. Yeah. When I first started, I didn't know anything, read anything, hear anything about growing a church, which I want to keep in mind is reaching the lost. Now there's enough stuff written about it to fill this whole complex and a whole lot more too, but we're having less of it because that's not necessary. All that information is not necessary. What it takes a passion for a vision in which we are disciplined not to be distracted.
That's so awesome. Dr. Laurel Buckingham. Laurel, it's been amazing to have you here today. Such a blessing. I've enjoyed our conversation. And I know we've got actually another podcast coming up together. So we'll look forward to discussing building Christ-centered confidence and navigating insecurities in leadership.
Oh, I love talking about that.
In our next podcast. So thank you for coming all the way to Halifax from Moncton.
Oh, that's some trip, I'll tell you.
Great to have you here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Well, today's conversation was fantastic, but we're not finished yet. We'll be back in the next video with the same guest with more discussion about leader health. You know the drill. Subscribe and hit that bell. Would you join us for the next episode? You can find new episodes every week in video form on the Aaron Ministry YouTube page and in audio form as the Healthy Christian Leader Show wherever you get your podcasts. Aaron Ministries is an interdenominational network of friends in ministry with a mission to foster healthy Christian leaders. Check out our website, aaronministries.com, for more resources and information on how to donate or to start a healthy Christian leader gathering in your area. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.